Welcome to BattleForge Legends, where legendary battles come alive with every detail. But before we dive in, imagine this. A nation immersed in the peaceful sanctity of a holy day, suddenly engulfed in flames and gunfire. That was Israel on October 6, 1973. On Yom Kippur, as civilians and soldiers knelt in prayer, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise two-front assault on the Sinai and Golan Heights. With over 80,000 Egyptian troops crossing the Suez Canal and thousands of Syrian tanks advancing, Israel faced an unprecedented threat to its survival, turning a sacred day into a nightmare of war. This attack struck like a thunderbolt, leaving Israel utterly stunned. With no prior intelligence warnings, the Israeli military was caught unprepared, with most forces resting or participating in festivities. Over 2,000 Egyptian artillery pieces fired simultaneously, leveling initial defenses, while Syria deployed 400 tanks to overwhelm the Golan Heights. Civilians fled in panic, and top leaders like Prime Minister Golda Meir and Defense Minister Moshe Dayan received the news with dazed expressions, unable to believe the enemy had planned so meticulously. An emergency response was triggered amid chaos. Israeli tanks, despite the surprise, were hastily deployed to form temporary defenses, struggling to halt the fierce onslaught. Thousands of reservists, just leaving their families, rushed to the front lines with uninspected weapons and anxious eyes. In the command room, generals argued fiercely, while Golda Meir faced a tough decision: request urgent aid from the U.S. or hold out alone. Confusion spread as the military realized the Bar-Lev line, a national pride, was crumbling under the enemy's overwhelming force. Radios crackled with chaos, war smoke filled the air, and Israel teetered on the brink of annihilation if it didn't act fast. Could Israel turn the tide from the edge of disaster? The war had just begun, but it already posed a question of national survival. If you're captivated by this historic moment, like, share, and subscribe to BattleForge Legends today. Hit the bell to not miss the next part, where we'll explore the background leading to this war. Following the resounding victory in the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel solidified control over the Suez Canal and Golan Heights, ushering in a new chapter in Middle Eastern history. However, this success brought no peace, only deepening hatred. Egypt, Syria, and Jordan refused to recognize Israel's existence, while Palestinian groups exploited neighboring Arab territories for sporadic attacks, creating a constant, smoldering fuse. From 1967 to 1970, the War of Attrition unfolded as a prolonged series of small-scale conflicts between Israel and Arab states, primarily around the Suez Canal. Israel responded by building the Bar-Lev line, a formidable defense with 20-meter-high concrete and sand walls deemed an impregnable shield. Meanwhile, civilians in Gaza and nearby war zones grew accustomed to life under pressure: daily sirens, children playing in bomb shelters, and women praying for loved ones' safety. Egyptian artillery strikes caused minimal damage, but sustained relentless tension. The leadership change in 1970 marked a new chapter of resolve. After the death of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who led Egypt through numerous wars, Anwar Sadat took power, driven by a desire to restore national honor. Simultaneously, Syria's new president, Hafez al-Assad, shared the goal of reclaiming the Golan Heights. Both received robust Soviet support, with modern weapons like T-62 tanks, SAM missiles, and self-propelled artillery delivered. Sadat and Assad not only focused on rearmament, but also reorganized their militaries, replacing old officers with a younger, passionate generation, laying the groundwork for a surprise attack to reverse years of defeat. During these preparations, Egypt and Syria quietly built their forces. Sadat leveraged Soviet ties to modernize the military, while Assad trained tank units to adapt to the Golan's hilly terrain. Secret drills were held, aiming to improve combat skills and send a firm message to Israel. Yet reliance on the Soviet Union posed challenges. Arab forces needed time to master new technology, and coordination between the two nations wasn't always seamless. Nonetheless, the determination to reclaim territory became a powerful motivator, pushing them toward a major war. These premises were not just a backdrop, but the fuse for an impending explosion where Israel would face its greatest challenge yet. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to BattleForge Legends to uncover the next part, where we'll delve into the strategies and preparations for this historic battle. Hit the bell to stay updated. Before the Yom Kippur attack, Egypt and Syria secretly upgraded their militaries to confront Israel, turning deserts and hills into prepared battlegrounds. With Soviet support, they were equipped with SAM missiles, rocket artillery, and advanced anti-tank weapons, while improving training and reorganizing officers, though they knew capturing the entire Sinai in one strike was beyond their capacity. This upgrade extended beyond equipment to combat spirit. The Egyptian military focused on infantry and tank training, with the Sagar anti-tank missile becoming a key weapon to neutralize Israeli tanks. Syria, meanwhile, restructured its high command, replacing aging generals with young, decisive officers to enhance coordination in Golan's mountainous attacks. Though lacking the strength for deep advances, they aimed to break Israel's defenses, creating a strong negotiating position afterward, using surprise as a strategic edge. Egypt's strategy heavily relied on static SAM missile systems to form a protective shield against Israel's superior air force. The plan was to advance rapidly across the Suez Canal seas, strategic bridgeheads, and fortified defenses to repel Israeli air counterattacks. Supported by rocket artillery and canal-crossing commandos, they hoped for an initial victory to force Israel to the negotiating table, though the risk of failure loomed if coordination faltered. Meanwhile, Israel basked in complacency after past victories. The Bar Lev line, with its sturdy forts and sand barriers, was seen as an impenetrable shield, fostering confidence that enemies couldn't breach it. However, not all agreed. Commander Ariel Sharon, drawing from prior wars, repeatedly warned of the line's vulnerability, especially against a large-scale coordinated attack. He advocated reinforcing troops and improving rapid response, but his advice was dismissed amid a false sense of peace, leaving a deadly gap for Israel. These preparations set the stage for an uncompromising confrontation where Israel's confidence would be tested by the Arab alliance's bold strategy. On October 6, 1973, the Yom Kippur attack erupted as 240 Egyptian aircraft bombed Israeli positions, paving the way for 4,000 commandos to cross the Suez Canal with a surprise tactic. Simultaneously, Syria unleashed a massive force with over 1,400 tanks flooding the Golan Heights, despite initial losses marking the fierce start of one of the Middle East's bloodiest battles. The initial Arab coalition assault exceeded expectations. Egyptian troops used high-pressure water hoses to breach the Bar Lev line, collapsing Israel's proud forts and swiftly seizing key points. On the Golan Heights, Syria pressed forward despite heavy losses from Israeli counterfire, using overwhelming numbers to overcome thin defenses. Within hours, Israel lost control of strategic areas, forcing its military into a desperate situation. The first day turned into a disaster for Israel. Its Air Force, a key strength, lost 27 planes to Egypt's SAM systems in just hours, leaving pilots helpless. On the ground, Israeli tanks became targets of Egyptian Sagar anti-tank missiles, suffering heavy casualties with dozens destroyed. The front line, already thin and unprepared, was surrounded, forcing a chaotic retreat that handed critical positions to the enemy. Israel swiftly shifted to total combat mode. Within 48 hours, over 200,000 reservists were mobilized, rushing to the front lines by trucks and transport planes, driven by determination to salvage the situation. Military leaders prioritized countering Syria on the Golan Heights, where the threat was more immediate due to proximity to Damascus, though Sinai losses also demanded attention. Generals like Moshe Dayan held urgent meetings in the command room, their tense eyes scanning maps, seeking ways to halt the enemy's advance before it was too late. Though disadvantaged, Israel began laying the groundwork for an impending counteroffensive. From October 9, 1973, Israel launched a strong counterattack with U.S. support, pushing Syria back from the Golan Heights and recapturing Quneitra, a crucial victory after early setbacks. Meanwhile, Egypt paused its offensive after consolidating positions, exposing a gap at Bitter Lake, opening an opportunity for Israel to shift the battlefield dynamics. October 15th marked a turning point as Israel, under the brilliant command of Ariel Sharon, crossed the Suez Canal with a pontoon bridge cutting off Egypt's supply lines and sowing chaos in the rear. Israeli forces advanced deep into Egyptian territory, threatening to encircle Sadat's troops, forcing the president to face mounting pressure. In Cairo's command room, Sadat and his generals debated fiercely, realizing their initial success was slipping away, leading to a decision to accept a ceasefire on October 22nd to avoid total disaster. Though the ceasefire was issued, Israel didn't stop immediately. From October 22 to 25, they continued attacks to strengthen their position, expanding control around the Suez Canal and maximizing pressure on Egypt. Meanwhile, the U.S. acted as a mediator, bringing Israeli and Egyptian delegations to the negotiating table with the American flag symbolizing its pivotal role in preventing escalation. However, post-ceasefire strikes drew international criticism for Israel's breach of the agreement, complicating the situation. The war ended with Israel regaining some territory, notably consolidating positions around the Suez Canal, but faced backlash for failing to anticipate the initial attack. Conversely, Egypt and Syria declared a moral victory, holding celebrations with cheering crowds in Cairo and Damascus, viewing it as proof of their ability to challenge Israel. This success paved the way for Anwar Sadat's peace negotiations with the U.S., leading to the later Camp David Accords, though it didn't fully resolve the Palestinian issue. Though the war ended, Palestinian conflict simmered on with rocket attacks and Israeli responses persisting, setting the stage for future tensions. The Yom Kippur War left profound lessons about surprise and the role of diplomacy in shaping fragile peace. The Yom Kippur War was more than a battle. It reshaped how the world viewed Israel and Arab nations, leaving a deep imprint on Middle Eastern history. After the chaotic days, both sides confronted consequences from human losses to national policy shifts, opening a new turbulent chapter. Israel suffered heavy casualties with over 2,500 soldiers killed and thousands wounded, forcing a reevaluation of its intelligence and military strategy. Prime Minister Golda Meir faced severe criticism for not predicting the attack, leading to her resignation in 1974. Memorial services were held nationwide with families of fallen soldiers, laying flowers on memorials reflecting grief, but also sparking unity to rebuild a stronger defense force, laying the foundation for military reforms in the following decade. On the Arab side, the moral victory became a powerful inspiration. Anwar Sadat was hailed by Egyptians as a courageous leader consolidating his domestic power after proving his ability to confront Israel. Syria, despite losing ground in Golan, held parades with T-62 tanks to assert strength, though it suffered greater losses than expected. This event boosted Arab nationalism, fueling anti-Israel movements, while opening doors for Sadat's negotiations with the U.S., leading to future diplomatic shifts. Internationally, the war highlighted superpower roles. The U.S. increased military aid to Israel, delivering thousands of tons of weapons to sustain its ally, while the Soviet Union continued supporting Egypt and Syria with artillery and tanks, maintaining influence in the Middle East. This intervention prolonged the war and set the stage for a regional Cold War with indirect East-West confrontations through Middle Eastern proxies. The war's legacy lies in shifting borders and policies. The Suez Canal and Golan remained contested hotspots, while the 1978 Camp David Accords, mediated by President Jimmy Carter, marked a turning point with the Israel-Egypt peace treaty. Yet the Palestinian conflict persisted, with uprisings and attacks reminding that peace remains elusive in this region. Like, share, and subscribe to BattleForge Legends to explore more lessons from war history. Hit the bell to not miss new videos.